my initial role prior to Rwanda was warfighting. We thought we were going to do one thing, we didn't. We did some minor form of armoured vehicles, essentially protection for the contingent in Rwanda. And because it was such a unique deployment, we were sort of brought into the mix of, right, if this thing ever happened again, what would we do? And learn a lot of lessons from that. And it was the first armoured UN deployment ever, my Rwanda small trip. So sort of lessons learned about how do we integrate Australian armour into an operation like that was the basis of potentially future operations. And then jump fast forward to 1999 when East Timor was to be supported by Australians to establish itself as a new nation or a country. We then went in as the first push into East Timor. So again, we were under the expectation was that a potential, because we were deemed as Interfet, not UN. It became UN after the fact that Interfet, which is what I was part of, virtually came in, stormed the beaches of type Normandy, landed, and then moved out to the borders, and then internally the country started to build itself with the help of the military, and then finally UN with other nations coming in and supporting. It was a sort of a rapid thing that occurred. Obviously they applied for independence. Indonesia had given the country, or East Timor's independence, and they decided a date when they were going to leave. From that date, rapidly our military got stood up to head over. We got the word to initially send what was supposed to be the full squadron over. Now the squadron is up to 56 vehicles. Initially we sent 2 in the quick reaction force, so they are on 24 hours notice. They flew in with a company of infantry to secure the airstrip, the airport at Dili. Then we got notice to send a troop, so we sent a troop a week later, and then we got a signal saying, and ironically I answered the phone at the squadron, and they said, "What are you doing there?" And I said, "What do you mean? We've sent a troop over." And he said, "No, the whole squadron was supposed to go. You've got a week to go." So that was it. I told the OC, we're all going, and off we went, packed up and quickly moved to Darwin, and then boarded the ship, the boat. It was the Cat, the one that we sort of hired and painted grey, the Jervis Bay, and put the vehicles on that, and the rest of them put on ships and sent them. We went straight over. 10 hours later, we landed in Dili. We quickly learnt about the historic from 1975 to everything from the Australians that were killed in Balibo through to the independence and how it all came about, and Indonesia was controlling it, to fast forward to you're in a week's notice and you're going. It was great, to be honest. We went a sort of 10-hour trip overnight. It was literally a civilian catamaran, which they used to use for the ferry crossing in Tasmania, painted grey, still had the seats, the televisions in it, had a bar, didn't have any alcohol in it, but had a bar, and it was as if we were doing a ferry crossing, but in this nice, comfortable thing with the armoured vehicles underneath, where normally the cars and things would go. So, we just loaded our armoured vehicles in there and whatever we could put in there and just went straight across. And it was ferrying backwards and forwards constantly, so. Quite sort of surreal. As we got there, places were on fire, infrastructure was damaged. The TNI did a lot of work to say, well, this was our country, now that we don't need it anymore. There was a lot of damage done, power lines, etc. You had the militia fighting, who were pro-supportive of the TNI, the Indonesian military. So they were still an element at large. But in short, once we landed, everything was ablaze, fire. The Dili itself had started being secured by that company and other armoured vehicles that were there. And then we virtually pushed straight out to the border, so down near Balibo. We were initially posted there, and then we moved out to our own separate area of operations down in Mako, and we used to open and close what we call Junction Point Bravo. I mean, there's still things on fire, it was a place of disarray. However, we had to get out to an imaginary, well, I won't say imaginary border, it's a very short creek line as far as you to me away, was the border line, a line drawn in the sand as far as this is now East Timor and that's West Timor, which is West Timor was Indonesian. So it was quite surreal. It's like we landed, ironic to the TNI were driving out, or elements of them were still driving out when our guys had already landed as well. So following them out to the border, and off they went back to the West Timor, and that creek line was the difference between two countries. We do everything from go and check on schools to patrol down to the border. Halfway through my time there, I was to be the headquarters, so we centralised in a place called Marco in an old police station. So we slept and worked out of the police station, which was abandoned, and we'd stay there and then centralised all our patrolling from there and coordinate it. Halfway through the 6-month deployment, I went and was the acting troop sergeant for our reconnaissance element, which was about 7 armoured vehicles. And then we I moved down to the actual junction point Bravo, which we opened and closed each day with the Indonesian military across the creek, which is about knee height. And we'd go down daily and then walk in the middle of the creek. I'd shake hands and we'd say, right, how many are coming through today? And then they'd say 1,100 with cattle, small trucks, children, the lot. And then we'd have our armoured vehicles at the creek line. They'd come through and we'd sort of vet and keep an eye on who they are. So just so that the militia weren't melding in with the civilian population. We did see some come through and we stopped them. They were, funnily enough, black T-shirts, carried machetes and that, not armed, but we would sort of make a point to isolate them because we could tell they were shaking hands with the Indonesian military on one side of the creek and everyone stayed away from them. So we knew straight away that we would sort of pay more attention to them and search them and just say, look, you can come back, but you can't do what you were going to do or what you think you're going to do. Because we had patrols everywhere throughout East Timor. Upon returning, now they would constantly come across and do mini raids and still be a bit of annoyance. But because we saturated with such a massive battle group at the end, it was very hard for them to move around and do any actions because we did have patrols in towns and villages and constantly moving around, which interfered with what they wanted to do potentially on behalf of certain other organisations that we sort of put a stop and curtailed what they thought they could do. Pretty much locked into the same, so secure the border, secure as much of East Timor. It's quite large, but and that's why my OC decided to have his separate AO, area of operations. Normally we do work intrinsically with the infantry in support of each other. This time we didn't. He wanted to have his own area of operations, and it was quite hard because not only do we maintain armoured vehicles, which is a constant thing we have to do, but also do the infantry role as well. So it's quite taxing on my drivers to be doing and working on armoured vehicles all day and night, and then also patrol, dismount and do vehicle checkpoints as infantry in support of that. So it was quite taxing in that realm in regards to working on our own independently from the infantry. Yeah, personnel carriers, so driver and a crew commander. And we had 7 vehicles, so we'd split up in 4 or 3 and then go off and do tasks and border checkpoints and border patrolling. It could be 30, 40, 50 kilometres, sort of, move to an area to do something. It's quite mountainous and hilly terrain, so we, even though it's not a long distance, it would be, you've got to go through a massive flowing river and either float through it or try to work 200 metres up the float to get the exit and time the exit to get to the next town, or to go up the hills, etc. I remember one time we had to take the recovery vehicle up because two of our army vehicles had rolled off a cliff, and I'm talking a very steep cliff. So luckily they survived, but how they survived I don't know because they rolled end over end. So the crew survived, but yeah, that was interesting. Evacuated, abandoned. Initially, a lot of people were, moved to or went to West Timor, and then they obviously wanted to come home because we were telling, look, we've got a border protection now, so your country, new country is safe. Come back to your homes, your villages. We'll help police and patrol and secure the place for you. So we wanted to reintegrate the East Timorese back to their place, those that wanted to come back. And certainly, as I said, we'd get 1,100 maybe through a day to come through, and that'd be 2 or 3 times we'd open that border checkpoint during the day. And especially with, if you've got between 14 people opening that border and letting those men up, and there was cattle, there was small trucks, kids, you just open it up so they could come home. Some of them have been through some pretty traumatic incidences prior to us obviously securing East Timor. So yeah, there was that factor, and they're potentially a bit nervous, obviously, because we're Australian soldiers in East Timor, which they've been used to the Indonesians controlling it, so they were a bit apprehensive in that. But we're certainly operating a different way, and we're there to secure their home, make try and assist them. Our engineers started to come in and assist in road building, bridge building, help them. So to try and establish sort of normalcy in the country. The Indonesian officers and the Indonesian soldiers were pretty good. They stayed on their border with all their little Indonesian flags flying, and we stayed on our side of the border as well. We had Australian flags and stuff, even though we were respectful of the East Timor country. So we literally go down into the water, shake hands, and then he'd tell me in English how many's coming through, and we'd shake hands, walk back to our sides of the creek and bring them through. So as far as those integrations, that was about it, really, because that was their country and we're in this other new country. So we were border side, virtually day and night, just doing the job. Funnily enough, I don't know if you know, but it's called Risk. It's a board game where you dominate and take it's throw of the dice and things. And I remember I had to ban the soldiers for having guns at the Risk table because people got heated when they got attacked by a set of dice. So weapons were banned whilst playing Risk. It's a good ball game where you can just play it, go away for a day and come back and continue playing it. So yeah, that was something to sort of, relief the time. That was a bit of fun and excitement sort of stuff. But that's about it, really, to be honest. Other than that, we're just doing the job. There's no gyms. There was no, you might be lucky to have a swim in a creek if you've got time. That's about it. So Christmas, because we're over a Christmas period when we were there, we had the traditional Christmas put on by the mess, but that was up in Ballabo, so near where the poor Australian journalists were murdered in that Ballabo house. We established our headquarters in the fort there at Ballabo Fort, or the battalion did, the 2nd Battalion. So they had the cooks and a kitchen, so they put on a Christmas feed. We sort of rotated patrols up there at a Christmas feed. Mind you, my hair was out here because we hadn't had a haircut in 5 months. So we went up, had Christmas feed, and then went back down to Marco and had our little area and stayed down there for the rest of the time until we went back. So sort of a funny light note, it was around Christmas time, they sent us a soccer ball ham, like a large ham, which is wonderful, but we don't have fridges. So in addition to that, someone thought it'd be a good idea to give us 20 litres of ice cream. So we're in East Timor, humidity's close to 90%, it's boiling hot, and we've got no fridges. For like the next 3 days, breakfast, lunch and dinner was ham and ice cream. I made them all eat it or throw it out, 20 litres of ice cream. So that was sort of a funny thing that, who sends a soccer ball ham, and we've got no fridge or anything, so we had ham, breakfast, lunch and dinner. But there's that, and funny little things like that, and it was just another deployment, really. I remember, we had a force show on, so the touring group. One of my captains, Brad Kilpatrick, Colonel now, but he used to be an actor in the TV series Brains prior to joining the military. Joined as an officer. His best friends was Kylie Minogue. So he actually got hold of her parents, via his parents. She wasn't coming over to East Timor, and through the parents, she said, I'll come because he's there. So she came over, we got to meet her, we got heaps of photos with us, the squadron guys, because of the lineage between her and Brad Kilpatrick. Yeah, that was great. She's singing Santa Baby on a trailer with a guy with a bass and a drum. And that was just, around the Christmas time. So that was really good. Doc Nielsen was there from the Angels. He sang as well. I think the East Timorese, in translation, are you ever going to see this place again? You know what comes after those words. We understood it and we loved it. The East Timorese didn't understand it, lost in translation. Another time that I remember the Prime Minister came and visited, so John Howard. We had to get him up on our armoured vehicle. Now, he'd hurt his hip or something just prior to coming over. And I still remember this. We had to build boxes up behind the armoured vehicle to bring him up. So in front of the media and the whole town, we gathered all the locals around who could barely speak English. We got him up there, had a microphone very similar to this on the armoured vehicle. I'm standing next to him, my driver's standing next to him. And he said to me, so when should I start talking? And I said, well, you're the Prime Minister, so you can talk whenever you want to talk. And but yeah, it was great meeting him as well. So a lot of memories too from in broken translation and talking to some people. Some of the people could speak English through their grandparents who were there, and we'd talk to them. They would talk about the Japanese when they invaded the country and how they used to help the Australian commandos in World War II that were situated in East Timor during World War II. My wife's grandfather flew a Beaufighter from Darwin and used to attack the same beach that I patrolled on in Adabaleton in World War II. He'd strafe Japanese barges, and I remember him telling me that story in sort of 2000s about Adabaleton. I mean, a lovely old guy. He had dementia, but he could remember exactly what he did on that flight. He told me a story of flying his Beaufighter pilot so low that when he landed back in Darwin after strafing the Japanese and going through the hills, there was a Japanese flag hanging underneath the plane because he'd hit a Japanese radar installation and hit the flag unbeknown to him and carried it back on the plane. So stories like that he used to do in the what they call the Whispering Death, the Beaufighters. It was great to hear his side of the thing and know that I was on the same beach that he was strafing in World War II. Ironically, one good thing out of sort of my Rwanda deployment, it woke up the Army to about pre-deployment briefings, to what to expect. It was quite good, and I learned a lot of lessons too myself. And the biggest lesson I suppose I learnt was support and advice to the families. Like this, again, we'd had Somalia, we'd had Rwanda, and then we had this another big deployment of East Timor. So I said, look, we need to get the families in. We need to explain to them, from little things of mowing lawns to mum and dad are not there. So the families need to be briefed a lot more. We had a psych team come in and do a pre-deployment brief, what to expect and family expectations and that, which was quite good. Unfortunately, the gentleman that dealt with me, and the idea was they dealt with us before we went over, and then when we returned, the same person followed up. So unfortunately, my guy committed suicide in the time that I was away overseas, the psych guy. So I spoke to another psych when I got back. So. But yeah, it was unfortunate with the poor chap. But at least we've learnt lessons from Rwanda and to some extent Somalia, to the point where the military started to bring those things in. So that was one good thing, if anything, that came out. So before psych brief before we left, and the families as well. So we started to get them involved and warn them out what it's going to be like, or they're going away and potentially could be in harm's way, and they might come home. And, so just to fully prepare them. And the families tight knitted, bonded together, and they'd have functions for the kids and that, just so they could keep sort of a family bonding military extension. Debrief when we got back, and now this sort of stuff didn't happen in Rwanda, and certainly Somalia was the same. So it's like lessons learned. The military finally said, "Look, we've got to look after this," and it's gotten even better, to be honest, since then. The other deployments I've done. As soon as we landed, we had 4 days off to relax, and then straight to work. And then site debriefs, the team came in and debriefed my squadron. So.